Mano lava le soifua, malangi mama, whaatalo whaatu, whapetai tere lava, ia oto uma, le matamata mai le breaking waves. Warm Pacific greetings. Talofa lava, I hope you've all been having a good morning. I'd like to welcome onto the show very special guests, members of the Polynesian Panthers, Melani, Alec, and Tigilau. How are you all this morning?
Thank you for that welcome. We're very well.
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Breaking Wave show to have this talanoa. Obviously, with the controversy around the Panthers film, there's a lot of questions that our community and also I have for you guys. So I'll start off with you, Melani. How did the TV series about the Polynesian Panthers come about, and who was behind the production and funding?
Well, the first time we heard about it, it was talk amongst the Panthers that a movie was going to be made. So it's been about 10 years in the making before it actually came out. But we were contacted by Tom Hearn that he was going to produce this, and we had a few coffees in Ponsonby to talk it over. And so that's how we heard about it. And we understood that it was a TVNZ production and that it was being funded from it. So that was the very first kind of hint that we had that this production was being made.
Were there expectations from the Polynesian Panthers when the project was first introduced to you, Dingy?
Yes. Well, the expectations, I guess, were they wanted our full support, and that it was okay with us before they proceeded, and to hear our stories, the fullness of our stories, so that they could run with it and make that movie out of our stories.
Yeah, we thought, wow, this is great. You know, our story's going to be told. That was our first reaction. We were excited about it and look forward to it.
Yeah. How are you feeling on the deal?
Well, at the same time as we were excited about somebody wanting to tell our story, there was also within the former membership, there was the thought that, or the concern that the production, whether or not it would tell our story faithfully. And so that was one of the reservations amongst some of the membership. And I think we went into this whole project in good faith. And the advent of this, or the program, just relating back to that first question, was that it was very much an evolutionary process. For example, there were books published, written Panther-authored books that were published in the early part of 2000, like 2005, books being published, documentaries were being made about us, and documentaries where we were included were also made about us. So there was already this pathway that was beginning to open up, and it seemed that the next the next logical step would be to make a movie or some other visual representation of us. So it was kind of an evolutionary thing. And so our expectations going into this with good faith was that the story, our story, would be the story, and that the story would be king. These are reasonable expectations that one might have or did have, and this is what we had. We had those expectations. And I think now, in light of having seen the end product, the former membership who had reservations, it sort of gives some credibility to their expectations. And sadly, none of our expectations were met.
Which we'll get into shortly about those things. And obviously there was a lot of excitement. You guys have gone into this project, partnered up with these people in good faith to tell a story that's truly important for generations to come. So how was your story not truthfully told?
For the last 12 years, we've been telling our story to thousands and thousands of school kids and teachers and corporates. That is our true story, which covers our programs, the pain and the the laughter and what we experienced is there in full view. None of that was in the production of the series. So it wasn't our story at all. So we've got to explain that to all the workshops that we're giving at the moment. Because as far as we're concerned, we talked about it earlier, is that series was just for pure entertainment. There was no truth value in it at all.
I think, in relation to that question, the historic Polynesian Panther Party and the Polynesian Panther Party Legacy Trust, that we are now, there was a central platform and central programs. The platform included non-violent resistance to racism. It also included mana Pasifika. It also included Educate, Liberate. And all our community programs pivoted around that platform. And the community programs themselves was a form of protest and a form of resistance to the kinds of things that were affecting us. For example, education, housing, and all this stuff. Our programs are built around that platform. We don't think that central part of our narrative came out at all in the series. And they preferred fictional storylines to our own storylines. For example, a lot of the activities that we did, the community activities that we did, that was exciting. There was a lot of drama, there's a lot of action, a lot of activity around those sorts of things. And it would have been a director or producer's dream just to tell the story verbatim without having to add any dramatic license to it. But instead of that, they chose fictional storylines. And that was kind of sad for us to see.
Yeah, and the whole context was missing. They didn't show the pain and the trauma that our communities were going through in Ponsonby, and it was just devoid. I mean, it only had mentions. I watched the whole series, and it only had little mentions of our program, but nothing in depth, nothing, no experiences. I mean, they were community survival programs because of the suffering of our people. None of that came through. As I say, it was just entertainment.
Yeah. What about for you, Dingy?
It's a story told by a former member of the Polynesian Panthers, one who resigned way back, I would say 1976 in fact. So further on, as time passes, he came back and wanted to tell the Polynesian Panthers story without our permission. So what you see in that series is his version of the Polynesian Panthers and his alone. Our involvement in it, like what you've just heard, none of it was truthful. It was his version, and it was made to entertain and to sell and to make him look good. That ex-member, it's like coming back into the community to sell our story. And that's the way I look at it. And he gathered around him those people that believed him. And they came to us to ask our permission and to verify all of that, which we did, but they didn't go with what we told them, advised them. It's not entertainment that we're on about. It's people's lives, our lives.
Absolutely. And for generations to come, like I had said
truth.
before. And a lot of our youth, especially vulnerable youth, they will look to these kinds of platforms and films and series to understand their own identity and what they come from. So this conversation is really important. And I wanted to ask, because you're all expressing frustration with how hard it was just to collaborate with these people. Do you guys have any specific examples of recommendations that, aside from the ones you've already mentioned, recommendations that you've given to scripts that they just didn't, that you felt was very important for the cultural integrity of this project, that they didn't take on board?
They didn't take anything on board actually across the whole all the levels of the production. For example, from who we'd like as a scriptwriter. There was one scriptwriter that we were given examples of, the scene one, and it was beautiful. It was what we were about, the spiritual, the cultural aspects of who we were. And but that wasn't listened to, so it goes from this, and then the scripts, we wanted changes on the scripts. That silly script part where he down trousers, like, we just wanted that out. That's not what we were, that's not what we did, and that wasn't listened to. And then it went to picking actors too. The person that I wanted to act as me wasn't chosen in the end, and she did a fantastic job, the one who succeeded, but it wasn't my own personal relationship with who I felt I was in terms of the character. So it went to that extent, every single part of that production, our suggestions or changes weren't adhered to.
Even the languaging. We objected to the languaging that was being used, and we felt that it wasn't respectful, and we didn't think then, nor do we think now, that our elders would want to hear that, and so we asked that the language be toned down. It's not necessary, and anyway, that just again fell on deaf ears. So both things, the languaging and the particular scene that Melani is referring to, it's a reflection of a lack of cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness. It's just not there. And there were other, as Melani say, other aspects of the production and other levels where there just appeared to be no cultural understanding about things.
Or care.
Or care, sensitivity. There was, for example, I'm thinking, what if all of them, from the oldest to the youngest, is sitting in the lounge watching this? What would they think? What would they think about who we are? Their uncles, their aunties, their grandparents, influenced by this. And many times I had conversations with one of the producer directors and insisted that the series narrative align with the real narrative, because we're going into schools and we are telling the schools our story. So those who've watched the series now and influenced by the series, we're finding ourselves having to defend the truth of our story against the narrative that the series has promoted. This was a situation that I hoped to avoid, and I brought that to the attention of the directors, the producers, and once again it was totally ignored, and now we find ourselves in that situation.
So it's very apparent that they didn't care about accountability or responsibility of the story that they were portraying.
What about yourself, Dingy?
Well, there's no way that they could have told our story mainly from an individual perspective, point of view of an ex-member. Although that ex-member did have a position in the Polynesian Panther party, had left, and to come back and try and tell our story and bring a new group of people involved in telling stories, like the media, to tell our stories. Well, I find that money was involved in it. That's the driving force behind that story. We're not about that. We're about our work, the community, changing our people's lives for the better, fighting for what's right. Money never, we did, all of those things were voluntary. But because of the amount of money that was involved in making this series,
about 6 million.
That's what it's all about. So being driven by that, they have to justify and in the end make it an entertainment a series, which isn't the truth of what we are about.
Right.
And two, they could never tell our true story because there's one person's version, not all of us. They'd have to consult us pretty deep and in order to get the full story and put that out. That is more acceptable than just one person's version, which they centered on, and it made him look good to belittle other members of the Polynesian Panthers. I saw the first part of it, and I never watched the rest because one of the members in that film, it's not him, made him look, belittled him. And he was a good friend. He was a good brother. And he did a lot of positive things within the group. Well respected. And in that movie, he was belittled.
Yeah.
That's not us.
No sense of truth there.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from this conversation is you've talked to these people, you've recommended things, and they've kind of just brushed it off and did their own thing. Did you guys feel like tokenized advisors at some stage?
Yeah, of course. We were just a rubber stamp. We weren't taken seriously, and it's very hurtful because this was our one chance to, have a production on us, and it's turned out so poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dingy's right, and I think we all agree that the series was made in the image of a particular individual, and not in the image of us. And so that's how we end up with this.
Yeah. How do you think would be a reasonable solution to because now the work is left on your shoulders as the Panthers to go and say that's not our story.
Yeah.
What would a solution look like to you guys?
I think a solution is a production company who is concerned about the VAR between our story and the truth, the VAR between our involvement in the whole process of the filmmaking from beginning to end, not this token involvement, so it's looking after the VAR between those above, beside and below that in terms of the whole production and every stage of production. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I do research.
Yes.
Working as a research, but that's the only way we can get as close to the truth as we can. And so it's story sovereignty, not allowing outside or external forces influence our story, whether it's money, whether it's who's in the production team, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So preserve the sincerity and honesty of our story.
Absolutely.
That's how we would see. So consultation from the beginning, because when they came to us, the script was already written.
What?
The script was already written. Even that first meeting we had with Tommy, and the script was already there.
My goodness.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really was disturbing for us was there seemed to be an air of inevitability about how things were going to go, regardless of what our input was. But in terms of resolution, I think there has to be, from a much broader point of view, I think education is another very important thing. And that we're already doing that ourselves when we go into schools, and we're trying to invite students to think critically about what they see and hear and what they're being told.
Yeah.
And this is, to us, part of that resolution is that the potential audiences or the potential students, not just for the sake of a series, but also just more broadly, think critically about your own reality and think critically about what it is you're hearing, so that you are able to watch things like this and then, is that real? Let's go and research that. And I would want for all the generations behind us to learn our stories, not just the Panther story, but all our stories, so that we don't just get the colonised, the Disney version of our story, which what the miniseries is to us is the Disney version of our story. So That's part of the resolution, I think. A big part of the resolution is education.
Yeah.
And also what Melani is suggesting as well, in terms of a truly collaborative thing where we are part of the decision making.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel, any of us, that we were any part of the decision making. So whatever suggestions we made, if we weren't at the table. So you know that old saying, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And that certainly was the case. You know.
We got barbecue, did we?
Yeah.
They put us on the roast.
Yeah.
So hearing your responses about how the story holders were treated on this project was very heartbreaking for me. I spoke with a friend who's in the film industry as well, and said that Indigenous stories rivals with investment the same as forestry, or if anything above. So movie and film companies are hungry for Pacific and Indigenous stories. And now hearing, that you guys have been treated this way. And if you look online, if you're a youth, you're just going to find information online, right? You're going to go online, you're like, oh, yeah, there's a Tongan person here, a Samoan person here, and they're going to look up. But the outcome is the polar opposite of, what you're assuming would happen behind a film like this. How do you think, what are some areas where we could indigenize film processes? And what would that look like to you or to you guys as a people? Because you know what it doesn't look like. Now what would it look like if,
Well, I said it before, it's being able to kia leva.
Yeah.
It's being able to look after the social and sacred aspects of people and things and ancestors and history, everything. So it's tightrope walking, but it's worth it because, as I said before, you get nearest to the truth. Because when you look after those spaces of relationships with those above, beside and below, that's as indigenizing as you can get.
But how can people who are not from our culture understand these kinds of, because it looks very different to us compared to, mainstream or Bailangi processes of doing things. Like, for example, finding an act, like the decision for you to choose the actor, if I'm not making comparisons here, if you were to give it to us, we'd take that feedback very seriously. To them, it's kind of like, we make the last call because we have to meet these goals and outcomes.
That's right.
So how could we find solutions to further understand people who are not from our culture about what it's like to take care of our stories and our sovereignty to them?
Spend time with us.
Yes.
Come to our activities.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, sustaining the relationships with things and people involved in the production. From every level. It's just, talking about it, and meeting up and understanding who people are what it is, and consensus decision making. Yeah. Rather than, hierarchical, in terms of who's leading, producing and everything. All those sections of how to make a film need to be talking to each other and on the same page. I know it's difficult, but that's how we get things done.
That's how you indigenize it, isn't it?
Yes.
Spend time with us. Come and see the richness of who we're reaching to, what our intentions are. The only way you can do that is to spend time with us.
Yeah. And seeing that there's so much money in stories and Pacific stories, what is kind of like your guys' advice to people who have these stories and they're valuable? What would your advice be to them?
Be very careful. Be very careful with who you work with and who you tell these stories to. And you've got complete trust. It's all about trust building.
That's right.
And having faith that your story will be king in terms of whatever happens, So it's, I think it's early days. We're just, as a Pacific Indigenous producers and writers, and at the beginning of this tightrope walking, because, and we'll learn along the way, but I think as Pacific people, the Indigenous understanding we have, for me anyway, is how to kia leva, how to look after those spaces and value them, nurture them. And that's how you get a win-win situation. Yeah. That's how you get optimal outcomes for all those involved. is through looking after those spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, in terms of decolonising the industry, we have a long, long way to go.
Yes.
Because it's not just the industry around it, there's a whole culture that is, supporting that. And so I guess we need to do what we've been doing for 50 years, challenging the status quo. And what is heartening is that there are a lot of specific initiatives. For example, in the area of publishing, that it was very difficult to get Pacific voices heard in that space. But now we have, for example, Pacific publishing companies that were born out of that situation where we were not getting our stories published. And so it's amazing to see that. And I think the next step for us in terms of a resolution for this would be, don't rely on the colonisers' systems anymore. Let's develop our own and create our own and tell our own stories our way. Because the coloniser is never going to tell our story how we want it told. And that's because one of the chief considerations, I think, in the current situation is the commercial considerations that seem to make truth a casualty. In fact, the first casualty is the truth. And so until that changes, we are not likely to see our stories bubble to the surface and be told as they are or for what they are. And so I think that structurally there needs to be something different to what's there. Because if we keep relying on the status quo, we're always going to end up with the same result.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to get onto the ethnicity thing.
Yes.
This for Pacific, by Pacific, that mantra, we had its use like 20 years ago by just making people aware, but now it should be the best person for the job. Because as Panthers, we very wary of the Uncle Toms, our own people who have been colonised and who are not like how we would do things. So we have to be aware of the Uncle Toms that are in situations of power that will want control of everything. But on the other hand, you've got these really good Palangi people who do have that sense of the wā, who do want to get to the truth, regardless of all the factors that are there. So, it's and that's how you care le wā, by you navigate, and you read people as you kind of get to know them, and then, then you can work with them or trust them. So, it's very complicated, but I mean, we're at the beginning of our journey, and this is a really good start to just
absolutely,
change the face of Pacific stories and story sovereignty. So thank you for thinking of that so early in the day.
No, it's okay.
If there are people involved in the industry that are thinking of trying to exploit us and our stories, wrong. We now have a Māori TV, Pacific radio, so we're sort of starting, establishing our own people to tell our stories, which is what we wanted with this series. Our own people to tell our own stories. But again, they've slipped into that money-driving commercial aspect where, they want to put us out as entertainment. No, we prefer an educational, if it's going to be that kind of medium, educational, thank you very much, rather than another exploitation of us. Yeah, and we're rich in our stories and history, as you know. So it's just a matter of time. And I'm grateful that we have survived to come this far and to see people like yourselves in the industry now that can tell the truth about us and with us and for the ones coming after us, because we've seen how much lies and, stereotyping. Enough of that. We need our own. Like we've said when they first came to us, we need our own to tell our stories. And so we are. And if this is part of it, great, let's keep going.
Absolutely. And we've talked about the commercialization aspect, the opportunities that come out of these kinds of projects. And there are actually a lot of people online who are supporting the Panther series, and they're saying, you know, my friends got jobs from that, my colleagues got jobs from that, and I get it. But, you know, what is your guys' response to people who are supporting, you know, this whole thing just because they were able to get an opportunity out of it? I'll start with you, Dingy. What's your response to someone who thinks like that?
Well, you can do the wrong thing in the right way, or you can do the right thing the wrong way. So, how these people are getting their work in it is the wrong way. In the end, it'll come back to them. If they do it the right way, it won't be for money. It's because their heart is right and they want to do something positive. That way, you know, taking a different perspective on our indigeneity, you know, because before money it was, you know, for the love of the people. Sharing, and, you know, we never leave anybody behind. In this society, and it's a European one, and it's individuals, everyone for themselves. We're not like that. So looking at it that way, we go forward. So Māori TV is a classic example. All of a sudden, the language, the culture, this rich in stories, can do away with all these American and other, you know, create our own. And there's enough. And educational as well. That's the main thrust of this, that we learn how to survive together, which is unique. And then the whole Pacific, huge, are our stories. Instead of allowing these other, you know, thoughts and ways of doing things that haven't been, you know, good for us. So we're on the right track, and I know we will attract the right people.
Yes.
Yeah. So we just have to look after our health and ourselves, and, you know, continue.
Yes.
And that is our dream, maintaining that the right person will make the next movie.
Absolutely.
I
No Uncle Tom's allowed.
for all those people who, you know, who are jumping up and down and says, well, you know, it was a big employer. Well, I don't think the movie was a big employer at all of our people. And the question that, you know, I would invite those who have that view to think about is, why are you doing it? Why are you doing this job? Is it because it's a job and it's money? Why are you doing it? What's your motivation? It just reminds me of Erica Huggins during our Black Panther 50th anniversary. A student asked her a question about his career path, and she simply said, whatever your career path is, understand why you are doing it. Who is it for? Why are you doing it? Who's it for? So to the people who want to say that they got work out of that, who are you doing it for? And why?
We were accused of losing 300 people's employment. You've just lost 300 people's job. My reply to that is no, you lost 300 people's jobs. Those jobs will always be there as far as we're concerned, if it's done right. You are the one responsible. So put it back, you know, I put it back to that person, to get it right,
So,
do it the right way.
Is the job's more important than the story?
Exactly, and the history,
Yes.
and the culture, and our
And
elders,
future
and our people.
generations.
Exactly.
For a daytime job.
Well, this is
Yeah.
it. You know, why are you doing it? What are you doing it for? You know, why are you doing this job? What are you doing it for? And I think that's that's the acid test.
Yeah.
And it sort of tells you who you are as a person when you answer it.
That's a very individualistic perspective.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's good because jobs come out of
got
it.
it.
Yeah, it is yeah. Or
It's
we're
very
on TV
Palangi.
now,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
why I love what you brought up about Māori TV, because, you know.
There's the example for us because it's working. It's succeeding.
Absolutely.
It's drawing all, acumen, teaching, putting us right in today's world. And to show the rest of the world too how it can be done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I always look up to creators or producers or directors who start off just on free platforms, social media platforms. I find that people who have a large or a huge amount of cultural integrity often get rejected by big industries. And the people who I find have, said no because they're not willing to compromise, always have it harder. Because they're not willing to sacrifice that part of them for the industry.
Those are the ones that we want to attract.
Yes.
There's more of us when you look around. There's more of us slowly
Yeah.
learning.
The ones who are standing strong in their own mana and will not budge because of money, because of notoriety or jobs.
Yeah.
That's
Our entire story is built on what we stand for, what we stood for, and what we didn't bow to. That's our whole. That's our whole outward. That's our whole being. Is that, and our story is built on that. And so we need people who are like that, who will stand and who will not bow, and be strong.
We encourage that. Because that's what our people want, and that's what our people need, and that's what we are about.
Yes.
Because these things we do voluntarily, from our heart, not for we'd be millionaires if we did it like that. But other people can do that. We've been doing this all our lives voluntarily, from young, so we know what it's like to be hit against and spat on and, rubbish, etc., etc. That just makes us harder. Because we know that the people that we are combating, the racism that we are fighting, we have to be smarter and stronger. And we call on all of our strength, which is everybody. Because,
I guess the activism is because for the love of our people. So if you get people in the industry who love, for the love of their people, they're doing what they're doing, then maybe we'll get somewhere in terms of the rich truth and history.
Yes.
those are the values. Those are the values, like what this is saying about Leva,
Absolutely.
the values.
Yes, I'd love to see, a homegrown Pacific film industry.
That's coming.
Yes, it is.
coming.
Me too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that
It's
would be
coming.
so awesome. And you guys should start running workshops at these production companies about what it's like to tell, Gil Leva and how to honor Pacific stories, what our stories mean to us. Because I think a lot of them who aren't from our culture don't understand that that's how we've passed down our history.
Exactly.
It's, they've got books, they've written things down. We don't operate that way. It's through storytelling and families. So bringing understanding to that. Do workshops at their production
I'll
company.
tell you what, one of the things,
we're
one
available.
of the audiences we're speaking to is private sector. And so, like, for example, we've given workshops which really are telling our stories to audiences like the banking industry and to global
That's amazing.
accountancy firms. So they want to know the stories. And so we are fortunate, I guess, to be able to address those audiences with the story. And the story for us is always king.
And that too, because they have Polynesian
Yes.
employees.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
That's the reason why they've contacted us, is because they have a lot of Pacific and Māori employees who are so ably qualified, but they are not taking senior positions even when the door is open. So they invite us to come along and talk to these audiences about our story and the journey of Pasifika people here in Aotearoa, so that maybe they'll locate themselves in this and be inspired by something, that history, and then see that this is the whole reason we even came here.
And our main thing that our platform drives at is to annihilate racism.
That's right.
And what we tell the kids is racists aren't our enemy, racism is. Racism is what we have to attack. And I mean, is this an example of what happened, racism in filmmaking?
Oh, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
the narratives that they changed
Exactly.
to make it look like, there
That's
were white
right.
heroes here and there.
Yep.
This,
Yep.
it's
We
unfortunate,
understand that
but it
totally.
was necessary
Yes,
to
yes,
happen for
yes.
generations
So
to
that's
come.
right up our alley in terms of...
It's like these bankers now, they have to confront their own racism.
Yeah.
So us being there as a catalyst to do that, great.
Yes. So we're getting into the structures, almost into the belly of the beast, these parents, these almost unadulterated capitalist structures. We're getting in there.
We're infiltrating the infrastructure.
Love it. Based on your guys' experience through all of this, how important is accountability in the film industry?
Most important, because if you're telling our stories, it better be the truth. Otherwise, it'll come around and get you in the end. We don't have to do anything. Whoever it is who's doing the wrong thing, the right thing the wrong way, it'll go back, without a doubt. We've seen that happen so many times because we're based on values that are truthful, and can't rock us from that, which is why we've survived so long. Because we'll never. That's the experience that we've learned. To stay true and not to sell out. The values that we've been taught and grown up with. It's voluntary. It's done with love, and it's a true revolutionary spirit. Like the Pacific Way, we don't leave anybody behind.
Yes.
So if you want a successful outcome or successful movie, you need to be aware of how you can be responsible and accountable for your whatever you produce, and be brave enough to look at the risks involved in it, and be brave enough to address them.
Yeah.
Yes. I think for a lot of people, in very commercial networks, accountability means something else. It means being accountable for the resources, accountable
KPIs.
for where every penny goes, etc. But the kind of accountability that we would want to see, is accountability to the voices in the story, that their voices are heard, and there is a lot of accountability that needs to be given to those stories. A lot of weight needs to be given to those stories, and also an accountability to the historicity of something. So realising, for example, our story, that there were huge risks taken by the membership. We put ourselves at risk of physical injury, of emotional and mental injury. And Dingy, he was incarcerated for his stand against the systems that perpetuate racism. And then there are many of us who are still today trying to reconcile the trauma of that time, and are dealing with that in different ways you can, and some just haven't dealt with it at all and have just gone down some very different path. So there is all of this other kind of accountability that we would want to see from any production company, and in the telling of our story, you're accountable for the transmission of the truth, so that the next generations will know the truth. We often use an analogy with the youth, and this is one of, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it makes a point. The story of Snow White, for example, and the 7 characters. We asked the kids at school, does anybody know the names of the 7 characters? And they're all eager. They're going, oh, I know them. And they come along, some there's even 12 names. There's only 7 names. And so they come back with all these names, and then we have to say to them, you know that when that story was originally written, there were no names, there were no characters. And it's only 1953 or thereabouts when Disney picked up the story, the original story, and gave characters and names to these people. So everybody from 1953 on believed that to be the story, but it's not. As this is what I'm saying, intergenerational integrity of our story has to be there.
When we were doing what we were doing back in the day as Panthers, our own communities, our elders called us moipi because we were just kids. We were just kids and we did things as kids would do, you know, but we stood up against the racism and the trauma our communities are facing. But, you know, I feel we're at the moipi stage of the film industry, you know, because you've got to conscientise, well, as Panthers, conscientise Palangi, tangata whenua, and our own people, you know, and so that was our drive that our platform hopes to meet, you know, and so I think we're at the beginning of change.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
To realise who we are, warts and all, and when we're trying to develop something new. And so, yeah, I think we're at a beginning stage of change.
I agree.
Yeah, which I think is amazing, and which I've shared with you that I was so happy when you guys came out about that story. A few of my cousins were like, why are you always happy when these bad things happen? I'm like, no, you don't get it. Bad must come for the light to shine.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
I'm so happy and so honored to interview you guys and inspired about your like courage just to speak up on these things, because this happens in the film industry here in New Zealand over and over again, but these people aren't brave enough, or they're tied to security. You know, they have to look after the bills, feed the kids. So having the opportunity to sit here, you know, with the Panthers and see you guys stand with such bravery on something most people would shy away from or just ignore is so important for generations to come, especially when the money in Indigenous stories is rising every year. They're hungry for our stories. And so I recently had seen a response from Tom Hearn and Toleafoa on PMN, where they said that they just tried their best. And I just wanted to know how you guys felt about their apology. Or I don't think it was an apology at all. It was kind of like, we did the best that we could with the resources that we had. I'll start with you, Melani. What was your first reaction or response to that apology? To that statement?
Yeah, well, I mean, the statement, I think it was said that they widely consulted, which was the truth. But what they weren't saying was the result, that the final outcome wasn't a result of the consultation that they went through.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. That I didn't think really much of it even as a statement. I didn't really think much of it. It was kind of very mediocre, middle of the road, uncommittal, and there was no kind of sense of any sense that they were responsible for any of it. So I think they were in that way kind of distancing themselves from any responsibility for what happened, and coming up with excuses like, oh well, you know, there was no agreement, we couldn't make everybody happy. We don't care about everybody, we just care about the Panthers, making the Panthers happy. After all, it is our story. Who else are you trying to make happy? Who else are you trying to get agreements from? So, you know, as a statement, I think it was pretty bland, and it's sort of like throwing popcorn at us.
But the good thing that's come out of it was that they wanted to make a second series. Maybe you want to talk about that, Ding?
Oh, good, go.
You know, so we had a meeting with producers, and the amazing thing was that we knew deep down, having experienced the first series, that they'd already written their series 2 script, probably, and maybe that was because they wanted to do a story about Ama and Dingy and Bastion Point with Ngati Whātua. And so instead of talking to us first, they already talked to Ngāti Whātua first about their involvement in Series 2 before we even knew.
Gosh.
And it
That's not culturally.
yeah, I know,
That's just,
but
yeah.
because there was a var between Ngāti Whātua and Tingy,
Yes.
you know, that they saw it and they said, if Matua Tingy agrees, we will agree.
Yeah.
And so we said, no way would you can use our name or anything to do with Panthers in your Series 2 or whatever you're going to do. And that squashed Series 2, thankfully. Thankfully, there's no Series
I'm so proud of you guys. See, that could have been a $12 million project and they said no. They stood. That is so brave. I love you guys. That's so awesome.
Well,
Sorry,
yeah,
guys.
they already had the funding.
Yeah.
They already had the funding, and the scripts, it seemed to me, were, in our opinion, already written. And it was just a case of getting our rubber stamp. And we just said no. Very adamant, no.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened after that, and it really doesn't concern us what happened to the funding or how they managed to go from
They just made another movie
make another movie.
out of it.
Well, he went on and did well. Noah, he went on and did well.
Yes.
Got those people 200 jobs still.
Yeah, and told the truth
300
and
jobs.
stayed with integrity. He moved on and did something really good. And with
What's the name of it?
the red gold,
Red, white,
Red, white, and brass.
Yes.
that one.
Oh yes,
He
yeah.
went on
They
and
went
did
on and
that.
did that movie with the funding.
So you know, sort of like karma,
Yeah.
because they listened in the end and cut it completely.
Yeah.
The one that instigated it, he got his money, right? And that's it. Now he wants to continue and attack us and all of that kind of stuff. Nah, we're on the true side. So we're doing the right thing the right way,
Yeah.
right? Tom and Nua, they did the right thing the wrong way. So for them to acknowledge that, good. Then they can go on and do better.
Yes.
Having learned that, right? It's the values in it. You know, they listened. Right? When in the end, they saw the person that put them up to it was at fault. Wasn't our story. They listened to him. So they did the right thing the wrong way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and speaking about your experiences. I am so encouraged today. I'm ready to go to war now. Just kidding. No, I'm joking. I'm not
Well,
gonna
she's
go
not
to
a
war.
war club for herself or something. My God, what is this?
But no, I'm so honored, and I think the thing I've taken away from this interview the most is how we're going to start a Pacific film industry where our cultural integrity, our values are ingrained in every step of the way. So as a word to all of our future producer and directors who want to go into the industry and have now heard or experienced about your guys' stories being put onto film, what would your word of advice be to all our youth creatives, directors, producers who want to become that, and what would your advice be in the future?
I would say you are enough. Wherever you are along your journey, you are enough, and stay strong.
Love
So,
that.
so another word that starts with E is educated. Learn the stories. We are finding with a lot of the creative responses to the Dawn Raid funded by Toleafoa is that history kind of starts with when the individual was born. And we're finding that too much. This goes, I guess, back to accountability. Everything Melani's saying is correct. You are enough. But I think we need to also be aware of the responsibility that comes with telling our stories. And being mindful that history didn't start with you.
Yes.
And it's not going to end with you either. And so that's that kind of education that I'm really talking about is understand your place in that history. What happened before? And I've spoken to quite a few young people in my different employments that I've had, and I've asked them, what do you know about this? And they can only tell you from their place, from that history began when they were born, and what happened before is irrelevant. And so we would rather that anybody who's entering into the storytelling business in whatever media is that they are aware that there is a longer history in all of our stories, and get to understand what that history is so that you are able to represent the story in a way that keeps the integrity of the story and the voices in the stories alive and front and centre of everything. And I don't think our voices were heard in this case. And like so many of these artistic responses that have come through, particularly in things like murals and also the printed media, we're finding that there are just key players, key actors in the history, and key events in the history that are invisible. And that's only because people have not done the research. People haven't done the research, although they claim to have done the research. So it's just really learning the stories, and I think once you've learned them, then you're in a place to be able to talk about them.
And the learning doesn't involve just what happens in New Zealand. It's the whole Pacific.
Yes.
Like activism, for example, it didn't start here
Yeah.
in New Zealand. It started with our ancestors and our homelands. And so we're trying to make that bridge and link with our Pacific homelands with Aotearoa and knowing that knowledge and history. What I call the 3 C's, which is the heart of racism. Is we've got to learn about colonisation, we've got to learn about Christianity and capitalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one.
And then you can make the right decision and do the right thing the right way.
Yourself, Tingy?
That'd be one of
That'll
mine.
be it. Well covered. Right, guys?
But stay on the right side of history.
Stay on the right side of history.
But,
You are a knife. Educate yourself. Stay on the right side of history. Don't be an Uncle Tom. Don't sell out. Stay true to your cultural integrity when storytelling. Thank you for joining us on Breaking Waves today.